And while she never talked about the sexual abuse, right, she played it in lots of different ways. But it was that moment when I knew, right, meeting her where she was at and playing with her was going to be the safety that she needed to work through those challenging things.
You said her language.
Yeah. And from then on, I knew that, play therapy was magic. And I'm sure you guys see it all the time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Therapy Unmasked. Today we have a really awesome guest. Her name is Stephanie Carbajal, and she is a marriage and family counselor, and she is here to kind of talk to us a little bit about what her and her practice does. So I'm just going to have her introduce herself and maybe go into more of like what she specializes in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. And we're really excited to be here and share a little bit about both myself, but more importantly, the work that we get to do with kids and families. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been practicing for 20 years, and we have a group practice in offices in Kaysville and Syracuse and Ogden. And we have 35 plus clinicians. We treat the whole family, but my specialty is with kids, and I'm a registered play therapist supervisor. Not a lot of people know what registered play therapists are, so we can maybe talk about that a little bit more. That's my love. That's my passion, is helping these little ones with emotional challenges heal through play.
Heal through play. That's kind of what we're about too. We call ourselves play-based therapists to distinguish the difference between like a play therapist, because you guys already have a good handle on that. But yeah, we use play in every session that we do as well. And so there's so much power through that. Tell us a little bit more about how do you define play therapy and what that is for our families?
Children, really, their first language is play, right? I mean, they do it from the very moment they start to breathe. They play, and that's how they learn how to do, most everything in life. And that's where all those developmental building stones and milestones come from. And what's so beautiful about play therapy is it's not just coming into a room and doing therapy and playing alongside the therapy. It's actually doing therapy in play.
Doing therapy in play. Yeah.
So, for example, if you had a little one with high anxiety, right? Rather than sitting down and talking through the skills that are going to help them deal with and manage that anxiety, you're going to get in and you're going to find out what kind of play they love to do, right? Whether it's puppet play or sand play or play in the dollhouse. And they're going to choose what they love. And we're going to go in and we're going to find ways to build their coping skills for that anxiety in the actual play themes and stories and scenarios.
That is so cool. And so what kind of training did you have to do to become a play therapist?
So above and beyond the training that you do just to become a therapist, right, a master's degree, it was probably about 5 years of work to become a registered play therapist, about 150 hours of coursework. I don't even know how many hours of supervision from another play therapist in them teaching and consulting and looking at specific cases and how that and how play can interact in that way.
So it sounds like it's like really specialized, right? Like It's not just, I know how to play with kids and you just sit down and do it. Like you have a very unique method, right?
Yes. It's very specialized, and it's learning how to attune to the child and learning how to attune to their play style and what pulls them in, what draws them in, and then learning how to really set the stage so that they can do their work in that play.
Our play-based therapy is very similar in that it's the kid that kind of initiates what kind of play it is. And then as a therapist, we're shaping and molding that play into these goal areas, right? So I'm sure that yours is very similar like that.
Yes.
Very research-based and very like evidence-based in what you do. And it's kind of this new buzzy thing too in your world, right? I've seen a lot of articles come out and people discuss it online and things like that. But what an interesting way to reach kids that should be intuitive, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and it just hasn't really gained a whole lot of popularity until recently, but kids have always been playing.
Yes,
It should be just a normal way to reach kids, right?
We've also found that kids learn a lot quicker too when they're playing. I'm sure you've probably seen that on your end as well, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have parents bring their kids in and say, I've been to 2 other therapists trying to work on whatever it might be, right? This trauma or anxiety or the depression they're experiencing. And we don't seem to make it very far, right?
Yeah.
And then the challenging behaviors come back. And a lot of times that's because they're not using play therapy, right? They're not speaking the language of the child.
Yeah. So you do talk therapy, but you don't speak the language of the child.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask why? Why did you choose to go down the play route rather than just the traditional sit behind a desk, take notes, listen route?
It's actually a fun answer to that question. So when I was a brand new therapist, I didn't even have kids in my sights. I was doing a lot of work with adults and marriages. At the agency I was working at, they came to the whole staff one day and they said, we've got this 5-year-old who's experienced some significant sexual abuse and we need to treat her here. This is her only option, right? Who's willing to take this one on and see what they can do with her? So I said, sure, why not, right? I'll try it out. I'll see what I can do. So I, quickly dug in and okay, what do I need to do with a 5-year-old? Saw some play therapy pieces and things and decided to just try it out with her. And she came into the office the first time and she didn't speak a word, but she pretended to be a cat. And so for several weeks, right, I just pretended to be a cat with her. And as that grew, right, it eventually created this relationship where she could feel safe enough to start eventually talking. And while she never talked about the sexual abuse, right, she played it in lots of different ways. But it was that moment when I knew, right, meeting her where she was at and playing with her was going to be the safety that she needed to work through those challenging things.
You said her language.
Yeah. And from then on, I knew that, play therapy was magic. And I'm sure you guys see it all the time.
Yeah.
I've a similar experience where, I was working with kids in the schools for so long. And, in the schools, you take them to a room or you take them to a table, work with them at the table, and then you send them back to class. And that's very traditional as far as therapy goes. But when I started doing that in the clinics that I was working in, like right before we opened this place, I was just finding, I'm not connecting with the kids really. And we're not meeting goals. And that's when I started to explore play-based therapy and using play as therapy instead of like this reward at the end. Yeah. Like if you do this, then you get to play. That was always what we said. And then when I started playing with kids and then shaping that play into goal areas, kids were making so much progress. And it was just almost that same scenario. So I champion what you guys do because it's the language of kids, just like you said. Any other stories that you would tell about play therapy that really are significant to you?
I think as I think about play therapy, oftentimes the challenge is parents recognizing or understanding what play therapy is and how magical it can be for their kids, right? For parents, they're struggling. They really want to have some relief for their child and for themselves, right? And so sometimes parents feel like, okay, if I just have a skill to hang on to, right? If I just have something tangible to hang on to, everything will be better. But oftentimes those pieces are absolutely necessary, but we've also got to get at the root of why these behaviors are coming up. And so a lot of times bringing the parents in and teaching parents how to play with their child it's so beautiful and it's so magical, and it helps the parent realize, okay, I can help them myself, right? In addition to what the therapist can do.
Yeah, and you get that overflow of the things that you've worked on in your clinics into the home, and success goes even further.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's a common thing we do here, as well as we have, not always, but we encourage parents to come back with their kids and not necessarily participate, but just observe and like what their child is doing so that they know what they can work on at home. Is that a pretty common thing at your practice as well. You just encourage the parents to be a part of that session.
Yeah, I really feel that a child really is not going to get long-lasting success without parent involvement, right? We really have to shape and change the whole family system in order for that child to really thrive. So as much as parents may want to hand us their child and say, fix them, I'm saying, let's bring you in as well, right? Let's do this as a family. Let's work together so that we can really change this for the long term, not just here and now, right? And this is part of what we're going to be doing. We're opening an intensive outpatient program called Carbajal Kids this year in April. And part of that program is going to be for those kids who, once a week therapy isn't quite enough, right? They're still struggling. They're not getting as much benefit as they need. And in this program, it's going to be a beautiful way for both kids and parents to gain that treatment that they both need, both separately and together, so that they can...
For kids and parents.
Yep. Kids and parents.
How many weeks did you say it is?
So it'll be an intensive program based on the individual need of the child and family. So it'll be 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. So really intensive.
Really intensive.
Most kids probably 8 to 12 weeks-ish, but just depending upon, their needs and what they want. But there's nothing in the area that
I've
offers
never heard
this.
of anything like that. That's so cool. What kinds of things do you find really help kids kind of get out of their shell, even though they've got you've got fun rooms, I'm sure, where you've got rice boxes and sand and, dolls and things like that. But what kinds of things have you felt really make a difference or turn the dials for a kid?
That's such a great question. It really comes back to the relationship that the child has with the therapist, right? You can have all the toys in the world and a child still isn't going to get
the playfulness,
right? That relationship that they have with the therapist is what's really going to draw them in and help them to play what they need to play. Oftentimes we say that we're the greatest toy in the playroom, and that sounds funny, right? But the therapist really has to engage with the child in that playful way. Otherwise, it's hard for them to open up all the way.
Well, I almost see like a tip coming up in my mind saying, if maybe you've tried play therapy with your kid in the past and it just didn't go well, maybe it was that rapport that they had with the therapist. Try a different therapist and figure that out. Because if the kid relates well with the therapist, then everything seems to work better, right?
Yeah, it makes all the difference. Yeah, it really does.
Research actually shows, right? If you look at all the research, the most important piece in mental health therapy is the relationship that the client has with the therapist. And it's the same for kids.
Yeah, it's the same research for us too, that we see that too, is, there's a huge piece of it that is the relationship that they have with their therapist. And the other piece, like you talked about, is what they're doing at home, the ancillary services or the other supports that they have. It's not always the technique that a therapist has. It's what goes on at home outside of therapy, and then the relationship that they have with the therapist. Before we started, we were talking about how our two fields are so similar and so symbiotic and work so well together that we need to foster more of that, because mental health and physical health, or the things that we do here, like at Ability Innovations, it complements so well with what you guys do as well, that we need to have stronger relationships there. What have you seen in your stuff?
Yeah, I think we've had kids that have come in and that are doing OT, right, and play therapy at the same time. And it seems to be a great match, right? Because you need some of those hands-on skill-based pieces, right? While also doing some of the kind of the roots work of weeding out, what kind of traumas might be there or attachment pieces. And it's you really need both to be able to thrive.
What we've seen is we'll do a little bit of mental health stuff, but we're kind of like first responders for some of that. And then we have to refer them on for people that are more specialized in that. And that's where you guys come in from our end. But also, you've seen it the other way, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're working with a kid and you're like, well, you could really use some private therapy in this, and send them our way or send them to like an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. Yeah, and it's interesting that our fields go so well together. I'm starting to see that a lot in our fields, that there's a lot of combining with mental health and with counselors and things like that, because it just seems to work so well together.
I mean, we've talked before about this too, with trauma, like finding the root of that trauma. Like sometimes it is just as simple as like if a kid is toe walking, they just don't like the way that the carpet feels. But maybe it's a little bit deeper. Maybe a kid doesn't like a specific type of food because they've had a traumatic experience with it in the past. And that's not necessarily something an OT can address. That would be something more that a mental health therapist
it's a little
would have to
deeper
look
than
at.
what we do.
Mm.
But even like the toe walking thing, like we find like there might be even a root cause of anxiety or things behind that. And so if you address the real root of the problem, then the symptoms of like toe walking dissipate over time.
And they're easier to treat too.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Oh, 100%. They're
And
easier
so
to treat. Yeah.
We have to see kids as like this whole person, right? It can't just be like physical and we neglect the spiritual, or we neglect the emotional, or we neglect the mental health part of it. Like there has to be all encompassing. And that's kind of like the models that we use, but I'm sure you guys do the same.
Yeah, I think ours goes to, looking at the whole child and all of those pieces, and even broadening it to looking at the whole system, right? The family system, and how all those pieces interplay.
I did want to ask though, so when you started Carbajal Counseling Services, what was like, because you could, being like a mental health therapist, you could have gone several different paths, right? You could have done one-on-one therapy with teens or adults, but you chose specifically marriage and family counseling, right? What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think even early on, I knew that healing comes through family systems, right? If for example, a parent just brings their child to us and says, "Fix my child," right? And we work on that, we're not going to get long-lasting change. And I knew that from the very beginning. Even before I went to graduate school, I knew that there had to be a family component to it. So that's what took me down the marriage and family route. That training specifically looks at what is this child's whole environment, what is this couple's whole environment, family's whole environment, so that we can really make long-term change.
It's so important, and that's one of the things, like I was saying, traditionally is missing from our therapy, our side of therapy, is we're saying like, like we take the kid, we work with them, then we give them back to the parents, and then we say, try these things at home. When the parents see what we're doing and they experience what we're doing, and it sounds like you're doing that in your guys' clinics and stuff too, of saying like, it's got to be this whole system. Like we're all part of this village that is supposed to reach these kids. And I mean, realistically, you probably see kids once, maybe twice a week, maybe more when you do your intensive program. But even then, compared to how much they're with their families or with their parents, like where's the real difference? Is it going to be in these snapshots times that we have, or is it going to be at home?
I think their success of healing and progress goes up at least 20% if parents are involved. As you've been talking, you get those little snapshots of kids that you've treated over the years. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this little one that I worked with for quite some time, who had some pretty significant attachment issues, came from adopted into his family, had a lot of significant trauma during when he was in utero and before he was placed for adoption. And it was really interesting to watch how important it was that adoptive mom was part of his treatment, right? And he would do really interesting things where he would come in and play, and he would make really icky soup. He would take everything from our playroom and make really icky soup, paint and flour and a little bit of salt or a little bit of sand from the sand tray, right? Maybe a few little mini figures. And one day he said, "My mom's got to come in and eat this soup." And I'm thinking to myself, all right, let's see how this is going to go, right? How is this going to work? He he ran out and he got her and he brought her back in and, Mom, come eat this soup. And she stood there and she looked at me and she looked at him and she looked at the soup and it's like, I don't know if I can do this, right? But what this little guy needed is he really needed to know if she could tolerate all of his stuff, like all of his emotional stuff, right? And so, of course, it wasn't actually edible with all that stuff in it,
Don't
right?
eat the paint.
So, but Mom came in and I had to guide her, right? Because she's like, I don't know what to do. But I had to guide her to say, he needs you to pretend to eat this soup, right? He needs you to be in this play with him. So that they could connect more and he could go, oh, my mom's going to love me no matter what, even with all this yucky stuff that
She can deal with the icky stuff that even I made.
Yep. Yep, exactly.
Interesting.
Wow.
And I think as a parent, like you wouldn't even piece those things together in your mind. You'd be just like, why is he always making icky soup? Like I see him doing it outside and to his brothers and sisters or whatever, but drawing that line of, oh, this is him seeing and maybe testing how we're going to react to the icky things that he's got.
Exactly.
Yeah. You've kind of built up these skills of being able to see things like that. And one of the questions that we always ask the people that come on our show is, since we're superhero themed and we're helping kids gain superpowers that they need for tomorrow, what are some of your superpowers that you've gained as you've gone along this path?
I love that question, especially because superheroes come into the play therapy room all the time.
All the time.
All the time. All the time. I think one of my superpowers that I've developed over the years is just being with kids, but not just, sitting in the physical space with them, but connecting to them and attuning to them and recognizing how much they need someone to be there in all of their emotional stuff with them as they play through it. And that's not always easy to do. But as I've sat with children for so many years, it's become such an honor to be with them in those pieces. That's one of the reasons why we're super, super excited for Carbajal Kids, which will be in South Ogden, is because we're going to have the opportunity to be with kids
and their parents
in all the stuff, in all the play, right? And even in peer-to-peer interactions, which is where a lot of them find trouble.
It's fantastic. It sounds like such a great program. Where can our families go to find out more about that program?
Yeah, so our website is carbajalkids.com. It's Carbajal with a J, not an H. That's kind of tricky. Carbajal Kids, as well as Carbajal Counseling is our group practice with our 3 locations in Davis and Weber counties. And we have probably about 10 therapists on staff that do play therapy that I've trained specifically in these pieces.
Per location or just 10?
10,
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Spread amongst the 3 locations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but we're really trying to, Davis and Weber counties have not had a whole lot of play therapy available to them. Most people have had to drive to Salt Lake. There are only, north of Salt Lake, there are only 2 registered play therapist supervisors. So it's really been a huge hole in this area, and we're really working hard to
get that out
there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whatever we can do to champion you guys too, and like our people at home that are listening to this, or maybe they're in the car, that they'll be able to take advantage of that too, and tell all of their friends and family members that might benefit from it too. So we'll put links to that in the section down below, right?
Yeah. We'll add it to the show notes and everything. So
great. In parting, is there any messages that you would like to share with our families that you think would be beneficial to them?
I think ultimately that if you are struggling in your family, right? If your kids are struggling, if you're struggling, if you're trying to figure out just like how to have a happy, healthy relationship, there's so much help. There's so much help. And sometimes it's just about taking that first step, right? Sometimes it's even that phone call for OT or for mental health therapy to just get the ball rolling and find those providers out there that really can help your kids and your family thrive.
Yeah, and I think that there's also a stigma that goes along with, I got to ask for help from my family because I can't do it. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that?
just step over the stigma.
Yeah.
Because and I think our culture and society is getting so much, there's less of a stigma than there used to be, but you will find such a support network by reaching out and getting help that it will become something that you'll be proud of rather than something that holds you back.
Well, and I always think somebody said this to me once before, that if you can turn your mess into your message, then you can go out there and say, like, I went and got help. I went to Carbajal counseling and they helped us so much to be able to do these things. And then it gives like hope and empowerment to other families. They're like, yeah, I mean, if they can go and do it, maybe we could too. And
I
just
love that.
Turn your mess into your message.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Spending the time with us and telling us some of these fun stories about things that you've learned and experienced.
It was super fun. Special thanks to Stephanie Carbajal here for joining us. And it's carbajalcounseling.com. Is that so we'll include that in the show notes, Carbajal Counseling. Feel free to click the links and check it out and see if marriage and family counseling is right for you. And also check out her latest project in South Ogden.
South Ogden, yep.
And it's Carbajal Kids.
Carbajal Kids.
Okay, yep. Perfect. We'll include all that below. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Therapy Unmasked. Again, like always, Therapy Unmasked is brought to you by Ability Innovations. You can check us out at www.abilityinnovations.com. We have tons of free resources available for you, podcast episodes, blogs, and articles that are written by our licensed therapists that cover everything from speech to feeding to physical therapy, sensory needs, and other occupational therapy needs. So feel free to check that out. All those links will be down below. We're super grateful for our guests today for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.